and welcome to the 10th episode of Archive Thrifting. And 10, that's kind of a milestone. Maybe I should try and do something at least a little bigger and a little nicer and maybe even slightly ceremonious for a change. But that did not happen. So, back on February 10th, a little over 4 months ago now, I went out thrifting. I hit 3 stores that day. I shot footage at all of them. And one of those 3 would-be segments I was going to drop completely and drop some of the stuff from the other 2. And, get back to it, take another crack at that store some other time, try some other stores, and just build it up and flesh it out a little more. But then that little virus thing happened, and it wound up shutting down the thrift stores for about 3 months. So today, we're going to look at all the footage I shot on that one day, good, bad, or indifferent. And having said that, the stores are back open now, and I am starting to try and work on number 11 here. But, these things take time. There's kind of a reason why these are usually several months apart. But I'm hoping that I can get another one to you by the end of the summer here. But anyway, here is our 10th episode Unextravaganza. Well, we find ourselves back at Savers, home of the creepy wooden Santa Claus. Will I find a Valentine's Day equivalent? Spoiler alert, no. In the glass case, we've got an assortment of mostly overpriced, loose video game cartridges, including Home Alone for the Game Boy, a few Game Gear games, don't have a Game Gear, Street Fighter II Turbo for SNES, never got into that franchise. There was an N64 game in there, never owned one of those. And there was a copy of Sonic 2, which came with the Sega Genesis, and I've still got the copy that came with mine. And T&C Surf Designs for NES from LJN. Pass. Well, I don't think a few stray seasons of Cheers and Married with Children quite merit glass case status. These UMD discs, on the other hand, don't deserve it either. I've got a few of these already, but nothing to play them on. Found an automatic playing card shuffler, and I'll give it this much, I've never seen one in the wild before, but I'm not much of a card player. Also found the world's most basic, unimpressive Truth or Dare game. Can't imagine why it's still sealed. It seemed to be Tanya Tucker Day in the cassettes. Already got a good 2-CD anthology of hers in another thrifting episode, though. Anyway, what I really wanted to point out was a little game RCA was playing with their cassettes in the 80s and early 90s. In the name of cutting tape costs, they would take a regular album, remove a few songs, and drop the price by $1. This Ronnie Milsap album had 10 tracks, but is down to only 7 here. I've already got this one on CD anyway, all 10 tracks. But bizarrely, one of the CD issues of this album is the 7-track version, for no reason whatsoever. But anyway, the CDs are looking pretty average here. Already got the Bob Marley and Bangles Greatest Hits. Now, this Steely Dan album had a version with a bonus DVD containing a mock episode of Taxicab Confessions. Alas, this is not one of them. I've already got this standard version, so no. Otherwise, the CDs are the usual, mostly 90s and early 2000s detritus. The DVDs were looking pretty dull here. Except a John Waters movie in the thrift store in Sioux Falls? Or it's just the John Travolta one. Yuck. Otherwise, it's the same old, same old. Well, except for this Carol Burnett one. Now, I used to watch the syndicated Carol Burnett and Friends growing up, and I loved a lot of those sketches. But I've had a much tougher time warming up to the complete original episodes, especially the earlier ones, and that's what these are, albeit a 1-disc, 3-episode version of an otherwise 7-disc box set. Well, I've got enough cassettes to warrant another one of these drawers, but oh man, this one has seen better days. And I see these just often enough that I'm not too concerned. Now, I don't see as many of these VHS drawers, but they're so bulky that they just don't fit anywhere. The electronics were a bit underwhelming, except for this wireless web TV keyboard. Of course, web TV is long gone. Dang it. I so wanted to get on the information superhighway. Well, this episode's a bust so far. And the haul from this store consists of Home Alone for the Game Boy, marking the first Game Boy game I've acquired since the 90s. Hey, I know how to pick the winners. And on to our first Goodwill. And don't let those bright blue sunny skies fool you. It was about 10 degrees out when I shot this. Found some semi-interesting albums. Found this White Hot Masters of Metal compilation from K-Tel, which actually seemed to be using the full album cuts here, and committing some serious groove cramming in the process. While the cover looked nice, the record itself was trashed. Found this much later Santo and Johnny album. Of course, they were known for Sleepwalk, one of my all-time favorite rock instrumentals. By this point, they weren't really doing original material anymore, but were doing instrumental renditions of major easy listening hits. As such, I passed on this one. Otherwise, it was kind of business as usual. The first Loggins and Messina album, which I already have on CD, Bertie Higgins, Just Another Day in Paradise, kind of the quintessential yacht rock album, and yeah, I'm a total sucker for Key Largo, but I'd rather have a CD. Jesse Colin Young, like him with the Youngbloods, never liked his solo stuff. BCI Sings, presented by the Brandis Barden Institute. Jewish music, not my department. And lurking in the back was a Stray Hit Records knockoff 45, this time for the doo-wop classic So Much in Love. For reasons I don't recall, I did not pick it up. But I did find a couple of CDs. First up was this local album from a group called Relative Harmony, despite seemingly being unrelated. And that is my kind of album cover. Tacky, bad Photoshop job, but it's religious, so unless it's completely insane, it won't be on archive. Now, please take the time to pause this video and read the liner note. I'll give them this much, they got some serious tenacity, even if they probably should have taken a little more convalescence time. By some bizarre quirk, next to the CDs, I found a still-sealed microphone pop filter. It was super tempting to pick it up, but the one I've got has been with me for almost 20 years, and it's showing no signs of falling apart. Knock on wood. Anyway, back to the CDs. I found a wedding engagement announcement CD, which I found a few of these over the years, and I always pick them up just in case they've got anything unique on them, but to date they've all just been regular mixtapes with the regular hits. Now, it doesn't show on camera, but the disc is a bit scuffed, but I dutifully picked it up anyway. I found a whole bunch of copies of something called The Invisible Deck. And you guessed it, card tricks. And I'm sure they're absolutely wonderful card tricks if they're plugging up the Goodwill bin. I'll stick with my Marshall Brodeen set, thank you very much. Anyway, I'm a total sucker for a good blooper reel, so it really shouldn't come as any great shock that this Time Life News blooper compilation caught my eye. No idea if it's the bazillion three packaging of the Tapes of Wrath compilation, but there's only one way to find out. You can see the Tapes of Wrath on YouTube. And the haul from this store consists of Through by Relative Harmony, which is absolutely MIDI-rific. And I guess I better cover up the address there just in case. It's the Destination Wedding Invitation CD. And, of course, the Time Life News Bloopers DVD. As is now customary with this Goodwill location, I can't seem to get a good angle to capture the sign. So I guess it's officially a running joke now. I was kind of on the lookout for cheap instruments at the thrift store, for my ongoing incidental music project, but I just wasn't paying $20 for a beaten, smelly, lacking in power supply, no-name keyboard. Well, maybe if it were an 80s Casio, but not this. Anyway, I found a couple of Panasonic Vhs Camcorders, and I still haven't gotten around to fixing up the RCA I picked up at this very store last year. I mean, this looks nice enough, it looks complete, but unless it's a really high-end unit, it's just not happening right now. And this Goodwill's been jacking up their electronics prices lately. As for this second unit, same as the first. I don't need or want another fixer-upper. Hey, how did my speakers get in here? I haven't donated them. Well, I guess there's only one way to find out. Nope, these aren't it. I foolishly cut the ends off of mine. These still look semi-intact. Found what appears to be a very early release of Crossfire.
Crossfire! You'll get caught up in it.
And it's freaking huge. I had the 90s one growing up and rarely had anyone to play it with, but this is like 3 times longer. It seemed to be more or less intact, but honestly, it'd just be taking up space with me. For the most part, it seemed to be early 90s day in the cassettes, right down to a single from Nelson, Ricky Nelson's Kids. Aside from that, a couple of badly beaten albums, missing their J cards no less. But there were a couple of interesting looking ones. First up, this one from Kyle Evans, In Heaven on a Horse. Seems to just be generic cowboy songs though, so I skipped it. The other interesting looking one comes from local comedy act Williams and Ree. Williams and Ree Live. Feed and mingle with live Indians. And before you get your panties in a bunch, Ree is a Native American. The whole crux of their act is to bounce off each other's stereotypes. Just below the audio cassettes were some especially cheap-looking VHS tapes. I found an Abbott and Costello tape from Burbank Video, which I assume is littered with new added sound effects. Then we've got Doin' It Country Style. Now, I've got a small stack of these line dancing tutorial tapes already, but I have yet to find those magic VHS vault-worthy ones. I'll pick it up anyway. This will probably mean absolutely nothing to most of my viewers, but I was thrilled to find this DVD of the Tim Conway Harvey Korman movie, The Long Shot. I had a VHS copy as a kid, bought from the previously viewed bin at the grocery store video rental place. Remember those? But I watched it so much that the picture was pure snow by the end, so I'm glad to get this one back in the collection. And this DVD is out of print, by the way. Aside from that, a bit of a near miss here. There was a sequel to A Christmas Story called It Runs in the Family, made by MGM, but that is not it. And then I found this rather dubious looking copy of the George Burns movie 18 Again. I genuinely can't put my finger on it, but something seems wrong about this one. It was an especially lame day in the records, but there were a few CEDs mixed in. I've just been seeing them a lot more since I've lived here. Unfortunately, these are pretty beaten and dirty, and yet still somehow worth $2.50 a pop. I absolutely hate this wet noodle of a movie, by the way. I don't know, maybe the skipping would make it better. Anyway, we've also got Certain Fury, starring Tatum O'Neal and Irene Cara. It looks fairly interesting, but I'm not putting the extra wear and tear on my CED player for it, and it's available on Blu-ray anyway. Now, the closest to a gem in this lot was, if I ever get to it, a copy of Yellowbeard, one of those legendarily cursed movies, written and rewritten time and again in varying degrees of inebriation, and it was the movie that killed off Marty Feldman. And this one's on Blu-ray now too, so I think I'd rather see it that way. This Goodwill was doing 3 for $1 on records, audio cassettes, and VHS tapes. Mix and match, no less. So I picked up this 10-inch Kitty Exercise record so I wouldn't have to pay full price for the other two items, totaling more than $1. Anyway, then we've got the Williams and Ree cassette and yet another line dancing tape. I just gotta know how they approach the electric slide. And of course, the gem of today's lot, The Long Shot on DVD. And the admittedly sparse final haul for this episode consists of the Lacrone rhythm record, probably from the mid-50s. We've got 2 CDs, that Wedding Invitation thing, which of course turned out to be just another mixtape. We've got the Relative Harmony CD, which pretty much describes their harmonies. We've got the Williams and Ree cassette, basically 40 minutes of a Native American and a white guy taking little snipes at each other and performing bits of songs. We've got the News Bloopers DVD. We've got Doin' It Country Style Volume 2 on VHS and The Long Shot on DVD. They Went That Away, and That Away is just gravy to me. And, of course, we can't forget Home Alone for the Game Boy. And the total cost of this haul came out to about $8. Definitely one of my cheaper hauls. Anyway, that is it for today. I'll talk to you again soon.
Close flip, that's the way to build a grip. Close flip, close flip, close flip, close flip, close flip, close flip. That's the way to build your grip. Close flip, close flip, close flip, close flip, close flip, close flip. That's the way to build your